prior to beginning the meeting, the mayor's here to swear the reappointed members in so that we have sworn-in members to create the quorum. So we'll begin and turn it over to Mayor Schweller.
You want to stand to the front or?
Sure.
That's a good camera angle.
Are we doing it as a group?
We can do it as a group or as individually, whatever you'd like to do.
Maybe come a little bit closer this way, and there you go.
All set? Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
Solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and will obey the laws thereof,
and will obey the laws thereof,
and that I will, in all respects, hold and enforce the provisions of the Charter of the ordinances of Bellbrook,
ordinances and the Charter of Bellbrook,
and will
faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
the office
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations, Ms. Ward. Voluntary? Thank you. You need to sign your oaths and we're. Just a brief comment. I mean, what you guys do for the board is, and for the city is, incredibly valuable because you go through a lot of work on the front end. You spend a lot of time on a lot of these matters that come up and you screen out a lot of things before they get to council, and that's greatly appreciated. And over and above that, I know you're doing it as a volunteer, and that's something that takes a lot of commitment, and we certainly appreciate what you do for us. Rob will just go ahead and make copies of them, and then we can go ahead and provide it back to you. And also this time you have to turn the office on there so there's no confusion going forward. I signed it, yeah. So once again, thanks to everyone. Thanks for your commitment. We appreciate what you do. With that, you can start your meeting and I'll sit back. We almost have a quorum of council.
Mr. Bamer? Mrs. Berniger?
Here.
Mr. Burke? Here. Mr. Ogba? Here. Mrs. Schroeder?
Here.
Here for the approval of the minutes.
Mine doesn't light up.
Yours is touchy.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Right?
First try.
That's his only job.
I'll just keep it on.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions or corrections to the minutes for those who were here? I think it was Philip, Aaron, and I the last time.
And
Okay.
My issue was taken care of.
As was mine. My issue was taken as well. It looks good. So it looks like we will go ahead and approve the minutes from our previous meeting on, when was it? It was August 17th, 2021. Okay. All right. As far as old business, we don't have anything on the agenda. New business, we've already taken care of the first item that was on there, which was the administration of oaths for the board members, for those of us who were reappointed. So it looks like the next item is to elect our chair and vice chair for this committee. So again, I'm a little rusty for procedural, but I believe we just open the floor to nominations.
Absolutely,
for,
sure do.
I guess we'll start with the chair. And I'm willing to.
I was about to ask if you're
Well, I was going to nominate Aaron to see if he was willing to serve as the chair. I'm willing to step down.
I'm willing to do it if nobody else is really inclined to take control.
And more than one person can be nominated, I believe. But I'm willing to. I will go ahead and make a nomination as chair. Okay. Great. And I believe we can take other nominations.
That is correct.
Philip.
You want to do it again? Vice chair? Yeah.
Well, let's finish that first because we have to vote on this first, on the chair. I believe we've had, I moved that we nominate Mary. Seconded it. Are there any nominations for the position of chair?
That was sort of a default, like, hey, I'll do this if you want to.
It-
And there would just need to be a second
Second,
of
yep.
that nomination if there.
Right.
I would second that.
Okay, so we have two nominees. So how do we work for the procedure?
If there's no other nominees, then you could close the nominations. Then we would have two nominated candidates. And then call the vote
Okay.
for those respective candidates. The order could default to alphabetical to call
Okay.
for a motion for appointment for both of those verified nominees.
Okay. So, all right, so why don't we go ahead, I guess we would
And
just.
that is considering both nominees accept that nomination.
Yes,
Sure. Yeah.
okay. All right, so I will go ahead and, I guess we call the roll for the vote then?
Do we open for discussion at all?
We
Or is-
can, yes. I think,
You certainly can. On a motion, there would be motion and then second. And after it's seconded, then it's open for discussion. But for the nominations, if there's any other discussion about the nominees, that would come at the vote of that particular nominee. So if there are no other nominees for the position, then we can close the nominations and then we can move that into a motion to vote for those respective nominees. If that makes sense.
okay. So,
If that's what you're ready to do, then if we are going to go alphabetical, then that would be, we're going to go first.
okay. I will vote for, Aaron Burke.
Okay, we would.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope, that's fine. We would call for a motion.
Oh,
To
to
appoint.
appoint.
Yes, or to, at this point, elect
Okay,
Mrs. Brinker as chair. And then a second on that, then we would vote.
okay, I thought we had already done the first and the second on that. Okay.
Yeah, for a nominee.
For nomination.
For nominees,
Now
yes.
we're, okay.
So now
Okay.
we've got our qualified nominees. Now we bring the nominees to the floor.
Okay.
to vote.
Okay.
Simple as that.
Okay.
So if there would be a.
Okay,
a
so
motion-
do you need a motion to say that I will make a motion to bring Aaron Burke and Meredith Brenniger up for a vote for chairman of the BZA PRC?
It would be appropriate, but we would need to vote on each of them separately, because there's, so we can count the votes for one nominee and then count the votes for another nominee.
Sounds like we've got to get it started with somebody nominating
So
somebody.
we just need a motion for Meredith to be chair of the BZA PRC.
Correct.
Second.
Okay, so that is your motion. On the motion to elect Mrs. Brenniger as chair of the board, calling roll, Mr. Bamer?
No.
Would be a yea or nay?
Nay.
Okay. Mrs. Brenniger?
Nay.
Mr. Burke?
Nay.
Mr. Ogrod?
Yes.
And Mrs. Schroeder?
Yes.
All right. And a motion fails. Is there a motion for?
So I will make a motion to vote for Mr. Aaron Burke as chair.
Very good.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And seconded. I'm going to call Mr. Bamer,
Yes.
Mr. Brenniger, Mrs. Brenniger,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Ogrod,
Yes.
and Mrs. Schroeder.
Yes.
That motion carries.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Easy
That's
enough.
a new procedure for us.
Easy
Okay.
enough.
Was there a discussion that you wanted to have? I lost track whether it was going to fit in there, but you said you
Yeah.
had some discussion.
Sure. I think it's like resolved itself. so-
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So now we have to do the same process for, we need to nominate
For vice chair.
a vice chair.
Huh? What?
Oh, do we switch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And correct, the chair is Mr. Burke, so
We're switching like midway through the meeting.
you are the chair of the board now. That's, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we opened the meeting and then now there's an elected chair, so that's, yes.
All right. So now we need to open up for vice chair. Do we have any motions for nominees? Is it appropriate to do discussion at this point as well, or should it?
Yeah, if somebody's interested and you want to throw a name out, then it's seconded and you could, if it is, and forgot who wants to do it.
Anybody feeling
Or
compelled?
we can draw straws.
I can be vice chairman if you would so want that. I would be happy to serve.
Okay. Was there, I guess, is there a discussion, anybody else?
I mean,
Yeah. Does anybody else want to do it?
Sharon? Okay, well, I'll move to, oh, yeah, I can do that, right? I'll move to
Yeah, you can nominate.
nominate Philip Ogrod as vice chair.
Second.
So now we can not open the floor for other nominations, I believe.
Mhm.
yes. Okay. Yes.
Good, and you would close nominations?
Seeing none, we can close the nominations and make a motion to, do we need to make a motion? since
Correct.
We are, yeah. Anybody want to make a motion for the vice chair position?
Yeah, I'll move to vote on
Philip?
Philip as vice chair.
Second.
Then there will be discussion if there's any.
Any discussion? So we
All right.
can Proceed to vote.
Mr. Bamer,
Yes.
Mrs. Brenniger,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Ogrod,
Yes.
and Mrs. Schroeder.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right.
Got the hang of it on that one.
What's that?
I said we got the hang of it on that.
We're getting there.
Good news is you won't have to do that again for a few years, right? So,
All right. So that ends the election process then. So now we can move forward to the property maintenance code proposed update section. I'm assuming at this point either Rob or
Yep.
Jason has discussion.
You've got it. I'll introduce Mr. Foster as our newly appointed Community Development Administrator. Jason comes to us with about 12 years of experience in the field. Started off in code enforcement, worked into a code enforcement administrator, administering a staff of people handling code enforcement, property maintenance, et cetera, working into Also, city planning, some zoning work, handling BZA cases, property review commission cases on behalf of the city. And then in the last 2 years has been promoted into economic development coordinator position. While he served there, is finalizing his capstone project through the Ohio Development Department for a Ohio Certified Economic Developer. So all skill sets regarding community development for what the City of Bellbrook needs regarding some of the code enforcement, zoning, planning, and economic development issues Jason brings within his portfolio of experience. So he's got a degree in business management as well, and we are very pleased to have him on board of staff. And he's hit the ground rolling and already presenting some updates to the property maintenance code here tonight. So I'll turn it over to him and have him explain the work that he's been doing. So.
Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. With your permission, sir, I will go through this page by page, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. So 1450-01, the purpose, and these will all be strikes, red strikes, and the underlines are the addition. So the first strike there, just simply adding a comma. So a lot of these are going to be grammatical changes. But the first under maintenance there would be adding a comma. Ensure would be the correct spelling of the word. Moving to 1450.02, safety, grammatical, same thing with enforcement in B number 4. And then in C, again, just the proper spelling of ensure. In 1450.10, powers and duties. E, in the last sentence, that should have been justification and not jurisdiction. (1450.13) unsafe structures. B, instead of using the term closed up, I thought it more appropriate that secured and then secure be used, just for again, more grammatical purposes. And then moving into the definitions, there is one definition that I am proposing. It's a definition of junk. This was a successful definition for enforcement at my former employer, another municipality. So that new definition will read: junk being scrap metal, scrap tin, scrap brass, scrap copper, scrap lead, scrap zinc, or other scrap metals and their alloys, bones, rags, used clothes, used rubber, used rope, used tin foil, used bottles, old or used machinery, used tools, used appliances, used fixtures, used utensils, used lumber, used boxes or crates, used pipe or pipe fittings, tires and other manufactured goods that are so worn, deteriorated, or obsolete as to make them unusable and unrepairable in their existing condition, but are subject to being dismantled, and other vehicles or other conveyances that are wrecked, dismantled, or in worn-out condition, or unfit for operation as a motor vehicle, unusable and unrepairable in their existing condition. That is a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
But it allows us to be able to be very specific on what junk is.
And this is replacing nothing, right? We just didn't have a junk
That
definition
is
prior,
correct.
right?
This is
Yes.
an addition.
Yes.
We needed it.
So
Very bad.
this was the first thing I added. So
Should also include
well, you could, yes, if they're unusable. I think you'll see in another addition later in the code where that may fit in a little better, but this could be used for that. Yes. Moving on in the definitions under tenant. I took out whether or not and just whether illegal under tenant. And then in 1450.30 general requirements, I'm sorry, 1450.31, there is an addition there under sanitation. It formerly said just the occupant shall. I've added the owner or occupant shall keep that part of the exterior property. And then another addition, which such owner or occupant occupies or controls in a clean and sanitary condition. There was a period there. I've added that comma and then the final sentence, free from all trash, rubbish, garbage, junk, or other refuse or discarded material required to be removed. I think that be more appropriate for the palette discussion, perhaps. Under the same header, J, outside storage, it did only say in residential zones. I've replaced residential with commercial and then added residential at the end, so it now covers both. So in commercial zones, all outdoor storage shall be effectively screened from view, and storage of miscellaneous items must be within enclosed structures or screened as required in the zoning code. In residential zones, all items shall be stored within an enclosed structure unless the item is traditionally used for outdoor activity or use. So, things such as grills, patio umbrellas, patio tables that someone may have on the side of their house, something like that. If it's intended for outdoor use or outdoor storage, then it would be exempt from this. If it's not, and you just have piles of pick what you like, that's not a violation of this code.
A clarification, because I guess something like traditionally used for outdoor activity or use, like a shovel, snow blower. I'm thinking about that. I had that out recently. I mean, like, what are there limits on that?
Well, no, a snow blower, particularly in the conditions we've had recently, that is not something that I would enforce
Right.
in this because it is traditionally used for outdoor use. Same thing with a shovel. If you're gardening every day, or rakes or whatever outdoor tool, you lawnmowers, you have it inside your house and in the backyard on the patio, whatever the case may be, that's not something I would put in violation of this particular thing. And again, these are proposed for discussion, throughout this evening.
So this would include this would not include lawnmowers?
It would not. So,
Thinking of like multiple lawnmowers being left on the side of the house or that sort of thing.
sure. And I can dive into that if you would like, or if you'd like me to go through everything and answer questions at the end. Totally up to you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, let's just get through everything and then we can come back and hit
Understood.
items individually.
Item K, storage of firewood. That formerly said firewood must be stacked and piled in a reasonably compact and orderly fashion. Well, piled or stacked in a reasonable fashion is very different from me to you, to you, to you, to you. So, I took out piled. So it must be stacked. Now, the one thing that I've learned over the years is if someone wants to argue the definition of stacked, then I will simply go to Webster and ask him what he thinks. And if they choose to argue that with me in court or before this board, that is certainly their right. But the definition of stacked is stacked neatly, squared off, not in a rounded pile. And then I also added in the side or rear of the property or in an enclosed structure. C of the same section, street numbers. The only thing I added to this, that they must be a minimum of 3 inches in height. That's actually a fire code, that all address numbers must be 3 inches in height. So just easy to add this in if that does have to be enforced in the property maintenance code. In G, roofs and drainage, that first sentence, the roof and flashing shall be sound, tight, and not have defects to admit rain. I struck rain and added penetration. It could be anything, whether it be rodents, rain, snow, birds, whatever the case may be. And I believe that's all the changes that I made. So I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I think one, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I
Phil.
guess one question I had is, we had looked at this prior, the whole, 1450. Is this changes to the current code?
Yes.
Or was that changes to what had been kind of worked prior?
So my first week here, I printed off the property maintenance code, the zoning code, the municipal code, right off the website. So this was the most current code. These are just proposed changes of what I saw on the website.
I have a question about your proposed change on the outside storage. Is it correct that it used to be for residential that it could be just stored with a screen and now it has to be stored in an enclosed structure? Is that correct?
Well, that was what I was proposing.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand the distinction
Yes.
of what you're changing.
Yeah, so what that would read now is all items shall be, which in this case they must be, stored within an enclosed structure unless it's used outside use. So yes, that's what that says. Now, you may run into something here and there that has a house with a carport, say a small house, carport, a garage, or shed. That becomes a little bit tricky. That's where I would probably use a little bit of discretion, to be able to enforce the code. But that does happen to come up from time to time. If the board so wished to keep screened, that's certainly, I can change this back.
Actually, I was kind of thinking of it more as a question, process question. I don't know how common this is, but just say, for example, there are residents who are familiar with the current code, and they have things outside that are screened in, thinking that they're complying. And then this recommendation is approved, and it's changed, and now it has to be fully enclosed. How do they become aware of that change and then time to get compliant or something, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I don't know how, like I said, this maybe is one time in the city, or maybe there's tons of these things, and all of a sudden we've got people who don't realize they're out of code. They thought they were with the screen, and now they're not.
Sure.
How do we go about doing that?
Sure. So what I would do, property maintenance code violations come up two ways. One, we receive a call or an email complaint, or I see them driving around. So, and I've seen a few so far. I've addressed several so far. I wanted to tighten this up before I really got into the outdoor storage, particularly with firewood. I'm not unreasonable, so that's one of those situations, and I'm a face-to-face type of person, so I'm going to knock on the door and try to talk to somebody there. If I can't, I'm going to try to find your phone number. We have access to our water department to be able to find phone numbers, so to be able to call property and say, hey, just want to let you know the code's been changed. This is the new code. How much time do you think you might need? And if that's reasonable, then I'm more than happy to give them that time. If they say, I need 2 years, well, that's not reasonable. Now, if they were to have to build a shed or something to that effect, then something else that this code will allow is I can give someone from 7 days to 6 months to get a violation fixed, to become compliant. So It's not something I'm unfamiliar with, and certainly something that I'm willing to work with any resident that wants to be reasonable.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And just to add on to that, I'm assuming that we'll be adding all of these to the website as soon as we can. Once,
Yes, once it's codified, yes.
so once council approves any proposed changes, it has to go through the process, however that works, and then it will be on the website and in the code and so forth, so.
They might,
Public hearing and all that.
yeah, and they might even put it in your newsletter if it passes too, just to say, hey, look, there's been some updates.
Yeah,
and-
it would be something that I would want in the newsletter.
Yeah.
And on the website and.
At least
Facebook if
references
we
to
have it.
these, you know,
Right.
there's been code changes.
Right.
because- sure, absolutely.
If I may, I just wanted to comment that I just think it's important that we added the commercial zones in there. I mean, that was a major thing we didn't have, I mean, we didn't have the teeth for a previous case because of that. So I think that is a significant improvement.
I do have one question about that because yes, that is one of the most important pieces that I see was an addition. But how? I mean, I am interpreting this as being pretty all or nothing as far as outdoor storage goes. There are a lot of businesses that have, well, maybe not a lot, but a few businesses that have traditional items in front of their stores that you would normally think might go there, but could be also considered outdoor storage. Are those things that would need to be removed?
Well, I think I can, this board would prefer that language be added to that effect. I can certainly do that. And the recommendation this evening will then go to city council for adoption. So anything that you change this evening or propose to be changed, I'll mark up, and that's what will go to council. So if the board would prefer something be added for that, I can certainly do that.
I think that would be important, just because we had some issues in the past that came up that were citing those other types of things that you brought up, that really probably should be defined a little better, so that we don't have people pointing out, well, what about that? Well, what about this? And you know, those kinds of things.
So,
Do you have an example, perhaps?
So, let's say the example is Dot sells bags of salt.
Yeah.
Is it
Exactly.
appropriate for them to have it out front where it's easy to back up and load up, or
Yes.
should they have that within
That's
their
part
facility?
of their, that's part of their everyday sale.
Right, stored
Okay.
outside though is the reason I bring
Sure.
that up. So
Sure.
I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that.
No, that's understandable.
Yeah.
What the intent of this code is they get a delivery in the evening, and all of those boxes are now stored in the back because they don't want to throw them away. And that just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing until you can't drive around the building because there's nothing but pallets and boxes. Any commercial use that sells any kind of merchandise that is allowed to have outdoor sales, this would not apply to.
It may be worthwhile having a reference in that section of the code that says, you know, regarding commercial businesses with outdoor sales and materials, refer to this code number in the zoning code for merchandise and outdoor sales, just to make sure that that's a point of clarification.
And I can do
Since
that
we-
if the board would.
I think that makes
I
sense.
think that would.
Because there is a distinct
Okay,
difference, and
Yes. There is.
that-
There is.
Yes.
I think that would be.
Okay.
And going back to my question about the pallets, where would that kind of fall under here? Because that came up also. I want to
Well-
make sure that somehow it's
Sure.
very clear that,
And to me, are we talking about broken up pallets or just pallets that are,
pallets pallets that are stacked, thrown,
Okay.
broken up.
Could be anything and any and all, I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, I
Big
mean,
difference.
If you have like 10 pallets thrown in a pile somewhere, is that covered by somewhere in here?
Yes, I would consider that junk. Pallets that are intact, that are stacked, I would consider firewood, or could be used for firewood. And if they're stacked neatly, then that's fine. But if they're just thrown in a pile and you have pallets broken up and they're now heaping, that's junk. Those are unusable, which fits into junk. Now they have to be removed.
I think there's a little bit more specifics, specifically at a commercial location, and to drill down, and I know where you're going to what you're talking about.
All right, I don't.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's what we're going to drill down in a little bit more specific, right?
We've been in meetings like that,
Yeah,
where
trying-
everyone,
Right,
Trying to bring up
absolutely. No,
things that we've
it's,
kind of
no, it's
dealt
good.
with.
Yeah, and those are good reference points, and that's the purpose of clarifying the code and making it a little bit more, succinct. So regarding pallets specifically, for a business that doesn't use pallets for loading or unloading or the receiving goods or things like that, that it's just a collection of pallets because they are potentially going to use them in the future. So it would be no different than storage of just excess material that may or may not be used, may not be sold, but it's in a commercial location. Storage of that type of stuff, where are the requirements to show that it needs to be
Okay.
orderly and or screened or
So, yeah.
enclosed, et
So,
cetera,
yeah,
et cetera?
that would need to be screened. So in the first sentence, in commercial zones, all outdoor storage shall be effectively screened from view.
So it becomes a storage item.
That becomes a
Okay.
storage
Okay.
issue. Now, I have the ability to make the determination, if they're broken up, pile, that's junk. If they're usable, then they have to be screened from view. And I would make that determination on site on a case-by-case basis.
I had a question going back to the firewood. So if they were to determine, say that the pallets would be firewood, then we go down to firewood and how they'd have to store them. Has there been issues in the past with people having firewood in front of them? Because on my walk today with the dog, I just thought there was a house and they had one of those like neat, it's like a circle type firewood holder, I would say, on their front porch. So with that, based on this, do they have to move that to the side of their home? If it's on their porch, is that enough of an enclosed? I've never thinking about
Yeah, it's a fair question.
No, I agree. And if the board, I can add any language that the board wishes that I add.
Yeah,
For,
no,
for
thank
your recommendation, I will add anything you would like.
And I think a lot of times, the stack is placed where it's most convenient. It's not that they're trying to put it in the front yard, it's that their stove is right inside their front door, and so they want to just have to walk outside their front door, then walk all the way to the backyard to get their wood, so. Yeah,
Yeah, to the point on that, there has been an issue where it appears that there's been deliveries of firewood dumped in front yards
Yes.
and left there.
And it was piled.
And then it was piled and technically correct. So that's been a concern of some neighbors and has created a quality of life issue for them. But to your point, perhaps some language where, because people are having stoves, etc. Some language where, even though not at the front of the house, some language that would allow for, if it is stacked and maybe against the structure or undercover or something like that. And
Contained by
right, yeah. The goal is that if somebody's getting a delivery of wood, that it's not stacked in the front yard and avoiding the piling it.
Sure. I mean, I've seen firewood in bad locations as well on my walks. So I was just
Yeah.
curious. Another home, for example, like I've noticed, they stack it down their driveway, and it almost looks like a wall. And I can imagine our neighbors probably don't like that. I'm not sure if that's something that's been brought to the board or not, but I just didn't know if there was a lot of talk about Firewood. I'm sure there is. In our neighborhood, there's a lot of talk about it, so
Sure.
I was interested to see the changes.
And that's the idea of making changes to the code is based on what we're hearing from the residents and, you know, what is affecting the appearance and the upkeep of neighborhoods and properties and, you know, what this board and then ultimately the council feels appropriate. So that's kind of the information that we were hearing, thus the language about not the front of the house. And it's hard to make exceptions for every little occurrence, you know, because then your code becomes so convoluted that nobody understands it.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's a happy medium somewhere.
Yeah.
So let me read this to you and see if this is something that you think is acceptable.
Okay.
This is just as quick as I can do it. All right. Storage of firewood. Firewood must be stacked in a reasonably compact and orderly fashion in the side or rear of the property, comma, in an enclosed structure, comma, or stacked firmly against the main structure or accessory structure.
Probably.
The driveway stacking would not be permitted under
Right.
that.
Yeah, I
Right.
think that would be.
When you say accessory structure, what does that mean?
An accessory structure would be like a storage shed, detached garage.
It could be in the front of that again, as long as it's against it.
Yeah. That's sort of the added
But an
language.
accessory
for the-
structure, by definition of the code, has to be in the rear yard.
Right, can't be in the front.
So the stack would in turn be in the rear yard.
I think it sounds reasonable.
I think so,
And my
too.
guess too is that if, especially since we're not out patrolling a whole lot of the time, if somebody is neatly stacked, I mean, because I've seen some houses too, nobody's probably going to
Sure, yeah. I mean,
complain about that, right? But it's the dumps, the ones that just dump the whole pile that.
And if that's the
It's
issue, then
caught.
requiring it to be neatly stacked solves it.
Yeah.
You know, if we
Yeah.
want to get into regulating actual locations on property, if somebody, you know, uses wood as their source of heat through the winter, they're going to have a large load of wood or a couple through the winter, and they may need some driveway. So, again, we can't make accommodations for every occurrence, but it's always going to be recommendation from staff that we still, you know, provide order, health, and safety to the property maintenance code, but also allow, you know, people to enjoy their home as they intend to enjoy it.
I personally like the new wording that you had.
I agree with that.
One question that I had that wasn't addressed was with brush piles. It says that they are not permitted in the front yard, but are limited to one per property. I have seen brush piles that are 20 feet high. Is that acceptable?
Only if they're burning it. I'm kidding. Kidding.
Yeah, that's, because did we go down that route of
Yeah,
trying to
we-
quantify that?
That's why I asked the question, if
Yeah.
this was based on the current code that is out there, or was it based on what was
This is-
previously kind of,
This is what's currently written.
Okay.
So right under storage of firewood, brush piles are not permitted in the front yard, but are limited to one per property.
Right.
If the board would like to see a change to that, I will be happy to write it.
Do you remember what we had written, Phil?
we had something about the height and the,
Was it like a 10 by 10 by 10 or something?
yeah,
or-
it was
I don't
a-
remember.
It was a clearly defined area or volume. And I know that it was height and it was width. We discussed that.
My suggestion, if you're gonna limit the size, you eliminate it altogether. So, other places in this code, well, previous page, code verbiage. go out and look for rodent harborage, but I can tell you a brush pile is probably going to do that. So I understand people have snakes that I have a large problem with you're going to build a bonfire in your backyard like the University of Texas. So, you know,
And I've seen, just in walking around, I've seen some properties that have 20-foot high brush pile that have nothing to do with it.
right.
We'd like to know those properties. We can address that.
Yeah.
Regarding something like a brush pile, you know, it would be logical to not allow it because there's really no justified need or purpose for it. It's just like collecting a pile of trash or junk because brush is discarded, you know, vegetation and trees that's intended to be disposed of. So dispose of it, you know. Yeah, and
Gathering it up and then you're gonna dispose
Sure.
right,
Right.
right, and by prohibiting it, if somebody is gathering a small pile for a little fire or whatever, or they're working over the weekend to take down and clear a fence line and they're stacking brush,
Right.
it's going to be clean. That wouldn't really be enforceable, and through the timeline of stuff, it's going to be.
That's really not the intent of
It's
what-
not the
what
intent.
you're after.
The
No.
intent is what you've described as a 20-foot tall brush
Right.
pile that you plan on lighting on fire one day.
And the
That's
code
problematic.
permits having one pile of brush.
Yes.
So it's really probably cleaner to say, no,
Yeah.
we won't allow you to gather trash in your yard, and brush is, you know, similar to that, so you just don't gather it.
And I think the trash services as well allows for like
They sure do.
brush to be picked up as well. So
They
it's
sure do, right.
Cut and
able to be
certain
disposed of. Yeah. I
Right.
mean, obviously you're not going to put your whole 20-foot high stack out at once, but yeah, I mean,
There are
there's means
ways
for
to
getting
get
rid of it. So.
Maybe it's just a case of people knowing how to get rid of it. I don't know.
Right. And I do have some letters that I can adapt. I have one for leaves. When I came on board, I found out very quickly. So that's going to be an issue in the fall. Breaks down how you can do leaves. I can do the same thing. It's very simple.
Falls into the same category as
More or less
piles of
does.
leaves.
More or less.
More or less.
I mean, I just simply have to add the delete letter. And that's going to be an informal thing. Someone that has something like that, you can knock on the door with my next letter. Give them a week or so to take care of it, or call me back, and if they don't, then violation precedent starts, and that's going to be about 21 days, give or take. So that's ample time at least reach out and discuss it with me.
From my perspective, I like having it with the rodent harborage. That's really what's happening with the couple that I've seen. Raccoons and skunks and things.
Sure. So, with that said, in that discussion, I, in that sentence, crossed off front, put a period after yard, and then crossed off the rest of the sentence. So, brush piles are not permitted in a yard. Now, I'll tighten that up. But something to that effect. I'll tighten this up.
So they're very wooded lots and.
Right.
We would apply the appropriate
Right.
this to it based on.
I can't do that tonight without looking through the rest of the zoning code. But if this board wishes to eliminate that, I can certainly do that. And then what would follow would be a list of standards or regulations. So
I'd offer as general comment to the board that, although we don't want to do it every week, modifying and adapting the code as we see changes in trends or service demands or needs of the community, it's not an impossibility. So a lot of times we get wrapped up in trying to cover every single thing in every single situation. And sometimes you just address, hey, here are some issues, brush piles, wood piles, the ability to define junk screening, address that and, in more of a simple form, and then see how that applies out. And if we need to make adjustments later on, we do. And we're going to see some of those adjustments come through somewhat rapidly because we don't need to spend a whole lot of time. We can spend a year going through every fine-tooth comb in the entire code. But if there's areas that are pain points in getting what we find to be the objectives of either enforcement or allowing residents to have an easier means to get permits and applications, whatever the situation might be, we address those pain points, make changes to the code, and operate. So I know that some of these things may not be worded perfectly, and we can come up with a bunch of different scenarios. But a little common sense and discretion goes a far way. But if it becomes a trend, that's when we need to make changes to the code. So we're seeing some trends that are created as obstacles, little things that come in once in a
Yeah.
Yeah,
we can work around those.
I definitely appreciate a lot of these changes. And, we tend to try to use the intent as well, but sometimes they were just flat out completely missing language that prevented us from really using the intent that we thought was intended. So adding these in is going to go a long way to hopefully easing the way we get to decide on some of these cases.
And it helps with the initial in the field applications. The hope is that you don't need a whole bunch of cases in front of you, right?
That would be ideal.
Yeah.
Take into consideration, like you talked about a wooded lot or a back to nature kind of area that, we don't want to get into penalizing people for having natural area.
Right. No, that will be those lots, and they're pretty much relegated to 3 zone districts. Will be excluded from that particular code.
I think it covered some of the main concerns, the firewood, specifying the commercial, and I think that covers some of the main cases we've seen repetition with.
Yeah, and I think with what Rob said and what Sharon's brought up in the past with her experiences, if we continue to kind of review these code more often, it doesn't have to become this giant endeavor to take on at once. So, as long as we can keep this sort of a regular occurrence that we review from time to time, I think that'll go a long way to simplifying this process. Other discussion on this? I don't know what the next steps or what's needed for us on this.
It would be appropriate to make a motion and approve and recommend these changes to be approved by City Council, and we can forward that recommendation as a formal action from the board to council. That would be very good.
I'd like to make a motion then to accept the changes we'll make based on our discussion here and have that to the City Council for approval.
Anyone like to second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion to approve the recommendations in the staff report of the February 15th BZA PRC meeting to forward to council. Mr. Bamer?
Yes.
Mrs. Brenniger?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Ogrod?
Yes.
Motion carries.
That ends the new business section of the meeting.
like to know, is there an update on the Dane Lane property?
And cover that.
Yeah, I think Mr. Schomer can cover that pretty quickly.
Yeah. So, yes, the information was forwarded to court. The owner is out of state and is in a care home. The court really is not going to impose any significant, actions or warrants or anything else like that to have them answer, to the charges. So we're kind of at mercy of that situation. We've had some contact. As we understand, there's a trustee, at least of the property. It's been kind of a work in progress. There have been some minor improvements to the property, but we are also to the point that since it has gone to court, we may look at bringing back for abating some of the issues regarding sanitation structure itself. So a rare occasion, but we've kind of utilized the process to its fullest extent. We can't tell the court what to do. And we also sympathize with the situation the property owner is in as well. And, the goal here is to assist them and remedy, the issue so it's a viable property, so that if they choose to rehabilitate it or sell it or something, that it's, and also to make sure to keep the quality of life and appearance of the neighborhood for the adjacent residents. So we may see that back here regarding approval of abatement, but of course, as abatements go, we have to cover the cost of that, and then we can also recover that through duplicate or through a lien on the tax duplicate and assess those charges back. So we have to be somewhat mindful in limiting our cost. We're not into remodeling somebody's property, but just addressing the emergent needs, which probably isn't satisfactory to the point of what neighbors and or maybe even the property owner would like it to be done, but we would just need to fix the things that are critical.
I know it is, I think neighbors are continuing to be concerned. It's just, I
They
know
are.
we're kind of limited in what we can do, but.
They are. It is. It's unique, but yet somewhat frustrating, for the homeowner and for a lot of people in situations. So now that we've got Jason on board and some of his ideas to approach it and some more full-time attention to it, as what we've had over the last few months, I'm sure we'll make progress quicker. A couple other cases that we have ongoing, just to let you know, that will likely be coming your way. There's a property with a misplaced shed. Well, it was built without a permit, and we believe it's on a property line. That also large pile of wood, some other property maintenance issues that we do not think are going to be remedied. But if they are, great. But if they aren't, then we will be bringing that case to you all, probably for next month's meeting.
Probably.
I just wanted to make a note. I noticed in the last minute meetings, the 2103 Lindley new construction that the board voted for and approved. I saw that today, and it looks incredible. I think it really enhanced the street and the way they did it, and letting the roof line is really pretty. So if they're watching, they did a really nice job. So
That was the accessory structure, I believe, right? Yeah.
yeah, those houses, that's our neighborhood. They're very bizarre that the side of the house is like the entry to their backyard. So some have built really elaborate additions. This one has a really neat, open concept, living area. So it faces the road, but the way they did it, I saw in the minutes, it just looks really great if you ever drive by it.
Cool.
It's a unique take on.
It does look nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't seen it recently. I will. I mean, because I think that's the point too, is sometimes to allow for variances that actually improve the quality of it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other items anybody has?
I don't.
Okay. Seeing no other items,
Comments out there?
oh, does anybody in the audience have anything they would like to? No?
Forest Greenwood, 42 Southwest Street, on City Council, and I appreciate all of you on the board.
Thank you.
You do good work. Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, I guess we will adjourn at 7:32.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
You hit your
Hour here for us.
There's no way. Isn't that crazy? I know you just walked up and touched it.
Yeah.
It just like went right off.
Touch it to the right.
Okay, do it again.